really cool. And we're also gonna change the kickstand out, guys. Alright, let's take a quick look at the
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I rolled over something.
Money work. El mundo quiere dinero.
Yeah, I know.
Money work. Se arregla con dinero.
SE Project branding logo that's on here.
Money work. Si me quiero educar, dormir en algún lugar.
Really cool. And we're also gonna change the kickstand out, guys. Alright, let's take a quick look at the
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I rolled over something.
Solo un par de gente se llama el booking entero. Funny, pasa verdadero. Si tienes lo verde siempre llegará primero. Pero yo Lunes. Money work. El mundo quiere dinero.
Yeah, I know.
Money work. Se arregla con dinero.
SE Project branding logo that's on here.
Money work. Si me quiero educar, dormir en algún lugar.
Really cool. And we're also gonna change the kickstand out, guys. Alright, let's take a quick look at the
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I rolled over something.
Solo un par de gente se llama el booking entero. Funny, pasa verdadero. Si tienes lo verde siempre llegará primero. Pero yo Lunes. Money work. El mundo quiere dinero.
Yeah, I know.
Money work. Se arregla con dinero.
SE Project branding logo that's on here.
Money work. Si me quiero educar, dormir en algún lugar.
Really cool. And we're also gonna change the kickstand out, guys. Alright, let's take a quick look at the
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I rolled over something.
Solo un par de gente se llama el booking entero. Funny, pasa verdadero. Si tienes lo verde siempre llegará primero. Pero yo Lunes. Money work. El mundo quiere dinero.
Yeah, I know.
Money work. Se arregla con dinero.
SE Project branding logo that's on here.
Money work. Si me quiero educar, dormir en algún lugar.
Really cool. And we're also gonna change the kickstand out, guys. Alright, let's take a quick look at the
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I rolled over something.
Solo un par de gente se llama el booking entero. Funny, pasa verdadero. Si tienes lo verde siempre llegará primero. Pero yo Lunes. Money work. El mundo quiere dinero.
Yeah, I know.
Money work. Se arregla con dinero.
SE Project branding logo that's on here.
Money work. Si me quiero educar, dormir en algún lugar.
Really cool. And we're also gonna change the kickstand out, guys. Alright, let's take a quick look at the
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I rolled over something.
Solo un par de gente se llama el booking entero. Funny, pasa verdadero. Si tienes lo verde siempre llegará primero. Pero yo Lunes. Money work. El mundo quiere dinero.
Yeah, I know.
Money work. Se arregla con dinero.
SE Project branding logo that's on here.
Money work. Si me quiero educar, dormir en algún lugar.
Really cool. And we're also gonna change
va pa' trabajar.
Let's take a
No hay
quick look at the
peligro. Money,
Hopefully I'm all good, guys. I roll over something.
Solo un par de gente se lleva el booking entero. Funny, pasa verdadero.
What's good? Mike's in the building. Welcome to another Freestyle Sunday, guys. I'm very excited for tonight's show. It's going to be really, really dope. Very, very excited to bring the person that we actually have on. And to be honest, I think it's going to be a very interesting one because Ishmael and I have met several years ago. If you guys have been part of my channel for a very long time, you've probably seen him in one of the videos, and I'm probably gonna roll that at some point because I think it's really cool just kind of show this, and it's just kind of give an overall idea of what motorcycles about, motovlogging, and creating YouTube content. You also create some really cool friendships and meet some very interesting people. I'll definitely run that clip of a video that we did do years ago actually, and I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And if most likely what you probably end up doing is go back and go to the channel and go through the catalog and you'll see that video, but I will run some of it here. Very cool. Also, it definitely took me back just seeing some of the old stuff that I did to the current stuff. But we're going to do what we do best, guys. As we do every Sunday, always do a big shout out to the sponsors of the channel that help us pay the bills and help provide really cool parts and pretty much everything that you see on my motorcycle, which is Motivation USA, guys. Definitely check them out if you're looking for any kind of parts for your super bike or pretty much your everyday riding motorcycle. And something that's pretty cool, very straightforward here. We'll do, what am I very interested in? Like subconsciously, I'm a very big BMW guy. So let's take a quick look here at all the options for BMW, but we're looking for the S1000RR. Fairly straightforward to kind of shop in the site. Just pretty much mark down your bike and the year, and once you've hit search, and just like that, guys, it starts uploading pretty much anything and everything that you would need for your bike or potentially upgrade or anything like that. So there we go. Seeing bar and mirrors, pretty much anything, and then as you start going further down, you'll start seeing some more heavy hitters, radiator guards, exhaust, just pretty much overall really cool mods that you might want to do. And it's the best way for you to support the channel, the stream, if you want us to continuously do this kind of project where we do it every Sunday. We hang out for about an hour to 2 hours. I always say that, but it's always end up being a little bit longer. But that's how you show love and support. All the links will be in the description down below. Always appreciate you guys shopping with Motivation USA. It helps with everything. So back to what we do best, guys. Now we're going to highlight you guys. We always do it very early on into the stream. Whoever shows up very early, we pretty much say what's up to everybody, give an opportunity to kind of show up their comments right on screen. That way, if you do YouTube content, you get an opportunity to kind of highlight who you are and stuff like that, and show that you're part of this crew. Pawamoto, happy holidays, y'all. Man, you're saying happy holidays, man. You can't say Merry Christmas. You're one of those people. It's cool. I'm just messing with you, dude. Sasong Motovlog. I'm so glad you're here. By the way, from the last stream, I thought about it. I'm like, man, was I too harsh? Did I go a little overboard with the critique or anything like that? And crazy thing is, I've been waiting for that recap video to see if you did a new one. Lots of shorts are going up. Really cool, guys, if you know. He's actually grinding. But I didn't see a remake of that video. I was very curious to see how well it was going to do or the difference in comparison to performance. So I'm still going to wait on that. I'm still going to hold you to that. We have Solo Rider 82. Was good, bike fam. COVID Mecca, Money Work. I think it's Money World. We have Futuristic Vipers in the building. Always good to see you. What's good, everyone? Of course, Wifey's here saying what's up. And Two-Wheel Twansy. I have to say it that way because Anna's going to get at me. It's like, it's not Two-Wheel Twansy, it's Twansy. So we do have Sturball. That's a brand new name here. It's Andrew from Motivation. Nice shirt. Dude, that is so cool. Guys, I always say this all the time. I rave about everyone in the team at Motivation, and it always makes me laugh whenever any one of them kind of come through and say what's up or whatever, just hit me up or whatever. I look at these guys as if they're part of family. But so, Andrew, so keep this to yourself, okay? Keep this to yourself. Do not tell anybody. Right, sweeties? This week, correct? We ordered something for you guys that's going to come your way for the entire team. So don't tell anybody, at least since you're here part of the stream, so you know there's a little surprise coming, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. Thank you for coming through on the stream. By the way, hit the thumbs up. Always appreciate it. What else we have here? Governor D. Nice, regular suspect here. Yo, what's good? Bike fam. Guys, if you guys didn't get an opportunity this week, I dropped a Street Fighter video on Motivation's channel. I was doing the front center lower lip of the Street Fighter in carbon fiber. Really dope video, very detailed, very clean install. As you can see, it's easy to follow, so definitely check out those videos. Again, that's one way you can kind of support what I do as well. And from there, we'll get to our conversation, guys. Super excited to actually have Ishmael on, man. As I mentioned, 7 years ago we met, and we talked about everything, had dinner, everything was really dope. But you know what? Should I bring you on now, Ishmael, or should I play that clip of that video, man? That was pretty wild.
That's up to you, my friend. I will leave it up to you.
All right, let's roll. Let's roll this. Let's roll this clip. Let's roll this clip. Let's see what I got here. Come on, I didn't fully queued it up yet.
That's all right.
All right, you know what? I'm just gonna bring you on first, and I'll queue it up after, and play it after. No Guys, problem. give a warm welcome to Ishmael, man. Really cool guy. Really excited to actually having him on the stream. Here we are, Ishmael.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to be on here. Like I said, I didn't consider myself a big hitter in the moto community, but I guess, you still brought me on. It'll be cool to have a normal man conversation.
Oh about, my God, cut it out, guys!
What's going on today? What's going on?
Oh my God, today? Guys, let me tell. So I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. So I hit up Ishmael this week, and I'm like, he's gonna be a great guest to have on, only because. So he was a prolific street rider. We both rode the street together, and I was thinking about it. I'm like, he would be a great person to have on because he's transitioned to having one bike to multiple bikes, and from riding in the street to being, an avid, I would say advanced track rider. And I'm like, that's a great story to tell. And he's like, no. Because usually when we bring somebody on, I'm like, oh, here's some of the people we've interviewed before, and here's how it goes. He's like, nah, these are some really big, important people. I'm like, that is not what it's about. We all have a voice. We all get to talk. So we went back and forth. And then he was like, yeah, okay, I'll come on.
Which I appreciated. Again, like I said, very honored to be here. It has been some time. Obviously, I have grown. I think you remember when we first met, I was still a young man trying to figure out his place in this world and still finding my way kind of in the moto community. Like you said, I think I was a pretty heavy hitting, I guess you could say weekend/daily rider. So I guess to put it into perspective for anybody that would question, because I know a lot of street riders go by miles. How about like 12 to 16,000 miles in the first year of owning that R6 on the street? So
that thing was clean, all black, man. We trooped to Manhattan with an R6 on a hot day, got some food, and just split traffic. It was crazy, man.
Good time. But yeah, so like I said, started from there. That R6 unfortunately was crashed on the track and then converted into what is now my main track bike. So it has evolved for sure over the years as I have evolved, like I said, as a rider.
So is that the same R6 that's on the thumbnail, the one that you sent me? Wow.
Yes. That's the same R6. So goes to show that if you stick with one bike over the years, you can go from I was terrified of turning the damn thing to now, obviously, I'm riding it on track and riding it somewhat confidently. I would still say that
Oh
I'm
my,
a
he's being modest, guys.
lower
Oh my god.
echelon of
Oh.
advanced track rider, if we're gonna put it like that. Um, like I said, it's been an interesting journey to kind of see the different phases of how a rider goes, through his or her career. And I think that there's been a lot of riders that have kind of either been interested, in going the same path that I have been in, like we discussed earlier. I think there's a lot of folks that have reached out and asked, hey, how can I get started? How can I get, into the sport a little bit more seriously, or, somebody starting out. And I think it'll be, interesting to bring that kind of perspective of somebody that really had a passion for the sport. Like I think a lot of your viewers, and just like you have, right? We share that same passion of spending endless hours looking at parts, looking at bikes that we want, watching tips and tricks on how to ride better, on how to perfect your craft. So I think it's going to be a good conversation. Like I said, I'll let you steer it kind of in the way that you would like,
No,
and whatever
it's
topics you wanna go across.
listen, this is great, man. This is exactly what I needed. Somebody to really kind of elaborate on things. Really, really cool, because it's one of the main things that we always talk about. First off, I noticed a very common trend. It's like you said, it's a very small and niche community. It's like a sub community. Also, I've noticed anybody that started diving into track, they don't refer to it as riding anymore. It's a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're no longer a rider. You're part of you're slowly inching towards WSBK, GP, stuff like that, closest to that. So you're really finding your passion, and you're funding everything on your own. So
Yes, as a privateer.
so that's one of the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about, because it's one of the things that's hindered me from actually jumping into the track life, which I'm totally planning to do. I'm planning to I always mention this every stream, that I'm looking to get a vehicle to either travel and also do track and everything else. And I know there's a overall cost outside of the bike, and it can be your main bike. So just kind of walk us through that and the steps, because you've had that R6 from 7 years ago.
Yes.
Brand new.
So not even brand new. It was a used bike.
Wow.
So I started off just like everybody else. I was a young and hot-blooded 22-year-old who was looking for, a motorcycle, and thought that, my wants and dreams were an R6. And so I had to go and get an R6, because that's what was going to drop all the panties, and that's what was going to go fast. Especially as a man on a budget, a used R6 seemed to fit the bill quite well. So we went out and bought, and I think at the time it was a 2008 R6, which at the time had I think like 6,000 miles on it. So by the time that we linked up, I think I had about 10 or 12,000 miles on it.
Wow.
At that point. And so yeah, I got up to about 18,000 miles. And that's when, at that point, I started off my career in track riding, which basically ended up being a good friend of mine and a friend from college who basically said, hey, his buddy at the time was racing Moto America and CCS, if anyone's familiar with the local club scene. He ended up inviting me to come out to my first track day at New Jersey Motorsports Park down in Millville, specifically at the Lightning track. So I rented a little U-Haul trailer, suited it up to my little Nissan Sentra that could barely tow this 800-pound trailer with a 400-pound motorcycle in it, and the hour and 30-minute long trip I took down to Lightning. And so that's how it kind of started. So we went off, with a stock bike, and I had to buy, obviously, a suit, and I had to buy some boots and some gloves. So obviously boots and gloves I had from the get-go, which I think a lot of guys typically will go with a jacket, a helmet, gloves, boots. So obviously I had to splurge a little bit of extra money into that. And obviously I had some stands, but as soon as I got to the track, it was obviously a brand new experience for me, seeing all of these really confident, extremely fast and competent people that were there and had, I think they were very serious. I think it comes off as a much different activity when you're on the street. I think people are very easygoing. Everyone is kind of just there to have a good time, but everyone's talking. It's a very social aspect. I think a lot of times on street, there is a little bit of alcohol involved, obviously, to lubricate a little bit of the social scenario, which I understand all within limits. But obviously at the track, I think that there was a different mindset, which was the first thing that came, or at least that was evident to me, was that everybody took it very seriously. And while everyone had a lot of fun, you could tell that everyone understood the risks that were involved with riding a motorcycle at such speeds. And they also understood that they needed to be of sound mind and sound body to be able to operate, the machine at a high level. So those were, I think, the two things that on my first track day really, I guess, popped out to me.
Mhm.
And then obviously when you get onto the track and you get blown by or buzzed by a coach or someone who's much faster than you, you start to understand what the machine is capable of and how much you've scraped only on the surface being able to ride on the street. So obviously the first experience, which I think for everyone is difficult, is that it's extremely addictive. So you can get there, right? There's programs that a lot of these clubs run that they'll do a $99 special for a first timer. Come by, do a first day on your track where you're in the classroom, you'll be learning, you'll be also going out on track and riding. We can provide a certain amount of gear, like for example, I know that they provide usually suits free of cost. And then at least you get to experience. And I think a lot of people get hooked at that, but then like you said, get stuck on the transportation side or the cost side of things.
Yeah.
Which I think for me early on was very difficult because, for example, I didn't have a pickup truck. I didn't have a van. I didn't have something to put the motorcycle in, right? So it starts to become a logistics problem. It no longer becomes, okay, I can't afford the bike. I think most people, yes, they can afford the bike. They can afford most of the gear, but then it's everything else that comes into play.
Yeah.
I think it's important to go ahead.
No, see, it's the same challenge for me because I could the bike part is fairly easy. The problem is really traveling because the one thing that works to your favor, it's almost like Andrew in the chat right there. He mentioned that the motivation team did a track day on Coda, which is freaking amazing. They have some great photos on there. By the way, if you guys are aware, that Triumph Street Triple I was rocking in Texas, that was his bike. That was Andrew's bike. Amazing bike. To be honest, if I had ridden that bike before getting my Monster, I would most likely have bought a Triumph because it's well dialed in, very smooth, great motorcycle, and it's extremely fast and addictive. Just like a Ducati has a distinct sound, and I think that's what I love about Ducati. So they're somewhat in the same field. But the thing here for me is the cost of doing it more than once. Let's say you have to keep renting a trailer. The travel, for example, where I'm located, it's about 5-hour drive to the Jersey course. So the one thing that plays to your favor, you live in Jersey, right? So at least you can get there a little bit quicker. So that's one good thing, and having a truck is the other. So having a bike, the cost of transportation, and if you are going to be doing a track day, I'm assuming you should probably be doing it more than a day. So I'd say stay for overnight.
Correct.
So it starts stacking up.
It starts stacking up, right? Mm-hmm. So originally, like I told you, I started off, it was a trailer and my little Nissan Sentra. Eventually, I started running into problems with towing with my Nissan Sentra. So that we'll talk about that later. But in the meantime, what I ended up doing in order to solve that problem, which maybe is an idea for the viewers that are here, I had a good friend of mine who was working at Enterprise at the time. I wasn't making really that much money. Track days were still reasonable, I would say, at the time that I started about 6 years ago. I went ahead and had him book me a rental van. I know that now with COVID times, things are a little bit different, but I used to rent a lot of vans from Enterprise at a relatively cheap rate. Mm-hmm. So basically, I would throw the motorcycle in there. I would throw all my gear, drive down, get to the track. Like you said, in the cases where I would spend more than one day, it would be useful to have the U-Haul van or the Enterprise van because I could actually throw up a hammock a lot of times. I would sleep inside of the van, or I would throw up a cot in there after I pulled the bike out and I would sleep in the van. Or if it came down to the facilities at the track weren't really that great, for example, the shower and the bathrooms, then at least I could put the bike in the van, I knew that it would be stored and it would be safe away from, you know, eyes of thieves, etc. And then I would go to a hotel or whatever it may be, a truck stop, you know, to clean up and take care of whatever I had to take care of. So that van situation was what kept me kind of into play, but eventually it caught up with me in cost, because renting a van for anywhere from $60 to $120 a day adds up. Even though you're saving costs, for example, of hotel fees, etc., you're still eating the other costs, right? Like, for example, a thing that people don't recognize is once you start to pick up speed, there's other items that come into play. So when I started off, like I said, I just came with the bike, suit, stands, whatever. Then you start to understand the concept of tire warmers. Oh, so I can get more out of my track day, and I can get more laps because I don't have to waste 2 laps every session that I only get 6 to 8 laps out of to warm up the tires. I get to warm up the tires. I get those 2 extra laps, or maybe I get the 1 extra lap, because the 1 is a sighting lap that I go out and make sure everything's okay. Tires are good. Tires are warm. Boom. Second lap. Let's go ahead and let's go for it. So these are the items that start to come into play that I think compound the cost, right? Because now you've got to buy a $400 or $500 pair of tire warmers. And then you start to buy the tires subsequently that need those tire warmers, which are $450 for the set, for example, for a 600. So these costs start to increase as you're going across.
So wait, wait. Just before you go any
Go
further,
ahead.
I'm so glad you're giving a really good breakdown of this. I think you're like, as I mentioned in the beginning, you're like the perfect breakdown of the person to kind of talk about it, because the way you're breaking it down is pretty much to the T. We're talking about a trailer. So this is from the perspective of someone that's starting fresh. Trailer, stand, which of course I didn't think about. And one thing that I know you probably either forgot to mention, I think in most cases it's going to be summer. You're going to need a tent, right?
You are going to need a canopy.
You're going to need a tent. So you would have to make sure you have a tent, whether it's raining or you got to bring food for a cooler. So it starts adding, I think very quickly, you're spending a lot of money just doing this. And that's always been my concern. So let's say if you are doing track, how do you justify putting that much money out? Because it is a hobby. You're just doing it for fun. The real thing that you're going to get out of it is really perfecting your craft, understanding what the motorcycle is supposed to do, how much trust you can have in it, and becoming a better rider. These are all amazing things that you're going to learn, and learning from other riders that are more advanced than you, which is amazing. But nobody ever talk about the overall overhead costs. So alone, just from what you're saying, give me a rough number of where we would be, let's say at that stage. Once you start going tire warmers, we're talking about now you would probably need tools, because you will have to do tire change at some point. If you're doing an entire day, now you have slicks, right? You're running slicks. You're not running.
You're running slicks. Yeah, if you're a competent rider who's fast, it's not to say that you can't run on street tires or DOTs, but these are costs that will hit initially, right? So there are upfront costs, like you said. You're going to need a canopy. You're going to need stands. You're going to need all of the safety equipment, right? Your motorcycle is going to be done in a specific way. So things, for example, that at least on the motorcycle side that popped up to me when I was new that I wasn't aware of was, okay, you can bring a standard bike in novice or intermediate. But once you start to get into advanced, and in some groups, even in intermediate or in novice, when you show up, they tell you the whole bike has to be safety wired. So all of a sudden, your drain plug needs to be safety wired. Your fill cap has to be safety wired. A lot of these things that people don't necessarily think about on the onset, and you need to buy these small tools that you need in order to do these small little jobs like safety wiring, right? I mean, it's just a small, amount of money if you're thinking about the safety wire tool and the wire itself. It's maybe what, 30, 40 bucks in total. But all of these little things that you need to have will eventually add up versus just being a casual rider who's got a bike in the garage, right? You just throw on your helmet, you throw on your jacket, you throw on your gloves, your Timberland boots, you hop on your bike, and out the door you go, right? So at least from a perspective of cost, I think from onset, from the equipment side besides the motorcycle, so we're talking a suit and everything else that I think we would need. And that list would include, right off the top of my head, a suit, gloves, boots, helmet, back protector, and that helmet has to be within the past 5 years so that it's certified and it's still fresh enough so that if something happens, you don't end up getting, injured. A cooler, a canopy like you had stated, and then probably a jug for fuel so that you can have enough fuel for your bike at that point. So these 8 things, I would say you can budget to maybe under $1,500. I think if you can shop around.
While we're talking, I'm totally monitoring what's going on. Also, Kuya 33 mentioned here some tracks/track day require water cooled bikes. So if your bike, you might have to change that as well. That's one other thing in terms of inspection. In case if you were to crash the bike, they don't want any coolant on the ground. So if it's liquid, water is just going to evaporate. So some of that stuff you got to keep in mind too. Again, I love the fact that this is what I meant by it's great to have you on. I like to hear your part of the conversation, and of course other people chiming in, kind of giving some of the stuff that we're kind of missing. Another thing that I thought also is that we're not factoring is race fairings. Because the minute I think after your first initial track day, what tends to happen, unless you have a naked bike or something like that, you're gonna either witness someone going down or someone's gonna give you the reality of it. Hey man, that's a nice R1, but you're gonna need race fairings because it's a matter of when will it happen. You are gonna drop it. So we're talking about maybe spending another couple of $100 on race fairings that you would have to have on at least for your second go around.
I think these typical set for, armor bodies probably cost about $1,000. I don't think that you need to go ahead and go crazy, for example, and have a professional painter paint them. You could go to your local Home Depot, grab some Rust-Oleum paint. I've seen some guys do some great work with a spray can, on those fairings. But I think, at the basics from the bike standpoint, if you want to step up and you want to start going more frequently, I think bodywork, clip-ons, and the rear sets really are the biggest 3, right? So whatever your body touches, I would say, and whatever can hit the ground would be definitely the items that I would definitely suggest, including tires at that point, because I think a lot of people try to cheap out on tires for the street, which I think is a big ticket item that a lot of people don't recognize, and that limits a lot of riders. I think at the end of the day is the cost of tires. That is the biggest consumable that you are going to be ripping through as a track day enthusiast. And that's what everybody's, I think, eyes are on. And I think a lot of track guys, from what I've seen, especially the more serious guys, will budget themselves for the year specifically by buying a batch of tires at the beginning of the year. They'll say, okay, I buy 20 tires and I'm done. If I blow through these tires, that's it. That is my budget for the year. And then they set their races accordingly to how many tires they have, etc.
Here's a good thing that just came up, and I think it would be a great part of the conversation as well. That guy Kel's in the building. What's up, man? He's big on track as well. He used to ride street just same as you, and had, I think, a big accident, and then made a big transition to riding track a lot, and really improve a lot on his riding. I've been watching a lot of his videos, and he does TikTok videos. So definitely, if you guys are tuning in, definitely check him out. One thing that Solo Rider mentioned here in the live chat is that it's definitely best to rent a bike the first 3 trip to the track. Is that very common that people just rent a bike? And I feel like that's a little tricky if you rent a bike. Also, I'm sure there's clause in case if you crash it. So what have you experienced that? Anything you could kind of like give us in terms of information? I'd be very afraid to rent a bike to do that. But go on.
I have, like I said, and I'm sorry for interrupting you in the question there, but I just wanted to say I've never personally rented a bike. I've never felt comfortable, just specifically because I think I knew at the end of the day that whatever liability happened to the motorcycle itself, I would be, held liable. So obviously I wouldn't have as much fun because in the back of my mind, I would be thinking about it. Mind you, I've had other friends that have shown up and done it, but it's basically a dealer bike that ends up coming on stock dealer tires usually. It's not a bike that you really want to be riding on track. I think even for a first-time beginner, if you're somebody that knows how to ride a bike on the street, you're gonna want to ride your own bike because you know where everything is, you've set everything up accordingly. Whereas a rental bike is kind of just, it's like taking a Toyota Corolla out on track. You're just gonna sit there and you're gonna be a little bit bored versus you left your M3 back at home and you want to bring that out and use that to its potential because you know the limit of the tires, you know what you've put into it, you know how the car has been set up, etc. So I think it's very comparable in the same way. Rental, maybe if you're going to Europe, I think that makes more sense because the bikes are more set up from what I understand in the European market. So there are specifically supermoto schools out in Spain that I've heard of. There are track day organizations in Italy that will rent you a motorcycle that is fully decked out for the track. I think that would be a good thing to think about. But in the US, I think that's still a market that's hasn't really grown yet.
So here's another thing that I'm just trying to find out who mentioned this, which was a really good point. They did mention in terms of added cost, which I was not thinking about as well. Yeah, Tool Twansy mentioned that don't forget about suspension setup. That's not cheap either. So I'm assuming that's one of those things after you've done it a couple of times, you start understanding the bike, understanding, hitting the apex from outside to in and then accelerate out kind of thing. So that start eating a little bit more tire because you're really dipping into it. Now you really have to dial your suspension. You're gonna have to have a professional do that as well, right? I'm assuming so. So it's just
I think
what's so weird to me. Often we talk about do track and get it. I think what tends to happen very easily: tape up your bike, get yourself a race suit. You can do track. But I think when we start breaking it down the way we are doing right now, it really feels like it's very challenging and it feels like it's a lot to tackle outside of the money aspect. It feels like it's a lot to have on your plate, but I feel like once you're in, you're in. Right?
Yeah, I find that a lot of people, and you'll see this even with guys that get out of the sport, will typically sell a whole package, a bike, a trailer, literally, they'll sell everything to get out of the sport all in one package because it's a lot to handle. Even if you're going to sell all of that equipment piece by piece, it starts to get very hectic. So here's what I suggest to a lot of people that consider track riding, but maybe don't want to step up to, for example, riding a bigger bike on a bigger track. I think a good point of entry is mini moto, which is something that's run on specifically go-kart tracks. I think that's something that's very accessible for a lot of people. The cost of entry is much, much, much lower. And I think it's a good option for a lot of riders to learn fundamentals and skills that they would otherwise do on the big bike and end up hurting themselves a lot.
I have a question. I have to ask. So I think that's really cool.
I have the answer. Let's go ahead.
That is a really good little tangent about the mini bikes because that was gonna definitely come along. Because my question to you is gonna be: some people go and say, "Oh, I'm gonna 300 or 400 and start there." Do you recommend just skipping that all, just doing the mini moto? Because I think that's a super cheap entry price point. Right? We're talking about maybe like $3,500 to $4,000 for a mini moto bike.
Yeah,
because I've seen people like Josh Herron like practice with those. So like even like really pro racers are using those to really understand the dynamics of what to do when you're on the road and how the bike handles and stuff. And no nannies on those mini motos.
Absolutely. So shout out to Ovale specifically. I have owned a lot of the Ovale bikes beforehand, specifically the GP0190. I've owned a few of those. They're an excellent training tool. They are a little bit on the pricey side. I will say that, but I think that they're a worthy investment. Ovale, Ohvale.
Ohvale.
They are they are an Italian company that specifically makes, I believe, from what I understand, the frame is made in Italy. Most of the suspension components are made in Italy, but the engine is a Chinese-made 190cc Predator engine. Basically, it's a Predator engine that you could get for example, for a go-kart. Popped into a beautiful trellis frame with a GP-esque feel. I mean, for me, it feels very comparable, for example, to the R6 that I ride. It's an excellent, excellent, excellent tool for anybody to learn, specifically if you're under the height of 6 foot, which again, keep this in mind, that's that's maybe something for people to keep in mind. The height factor is definitely comes into mind with the mini moto. So if you're a little bit on the taller side, maybe I suggest a dirt bike that you can convert over into a mini supermoto.
So
Think along the lines of
as you're talking,
CRF
I actually
150R.
have it on the screen here, the Ovale. I think if I might be wrong about this, I think Motivation, the team at Motivation, just picked up one. They were doing an unboxing on Instagram stories. I'm guessing here, but it's looking like here, really cool little mini bike here. I think 4-stroke, 2-valve, 2 or 4 valves automatic 4-speed version with electric or kickstart, 8 horsepower, 25 horsepower. Right? Is that the correct bike right there? That is crazy.
Is the correct bike.
What is the entry price point for you to grab one of these little bikes here? Because I'm pretty, you just struck a little bit of excitement out of me because I feel like no, to be honest, anything that's like anywhere between 3,000 to 6,000, I feel like it's a valid little way that you can kind of get into the game and really just to kind of understand. For example, I'm doing the very same exact thing with practicing wheelies, and I bought like a KLX just to kind of do it, and I feel like it's the perfect thing, and I start picking up things really quickly. So just what would something like this cost? Actually, I'm pretty curious here now.
I think a brand new Ovale GP2, from what I understand out the box, shipped everything is about 9 to 10 grand.
Okay.
I understand that is a big number for a lot of people that are looking at it going, this is like a Grom for 9 or 10 grand. I promise you, it is not a Grom. It is the equivalent, a motorcycle equivalent of a shifter cart, like a very high-end racing go-kart. I mean, these things are extremely well built. They are exceptionally sturdy. They crash very well. These are training bikes, and they are used all over the world. If you take a look, a lot of the MotoGP stars are sponsored by Ovale. They do have these bikes. They do practice on them. They do use them. I think it's a great, like I said, tool. The newer model, the GP2, is a little bit bigger. It does utilize 12-inch wheels, whereas the older model, the GP0, uses 10-inch wheels. I think for anybody looking for a good deal, they do pop up every once in a while on Facebook Marketplace or, for example, on Craigslist. They are a little bit hard to scoop up because, again, these are very niche bikes. A lot of the people that buy them end up buying them for their kids to race specifically or to learn and basically build up the skills. I have seen a lot of kids build their careers off of these bikes, and it's yet to see, obviously, because they are still new, but I'm very certain that a lot of these kids that have built careers on them will continue to be successful in the future thanks to these bikes.
Yeah, that guy Kells mentioned here that you definitely got to get a dedicated bike for the track because, again, just like people are saying here, it's like it's bound to happen sooner or later. Also, he mentioned here a Grom, I can get a ZX6 or an R6 for that price. So I definitely think that's going to be a lot of people's sentiment, but I think this is for someone that's really looking to perfect and understand everything about motorcycles. And it is tough to kind of swallow that pill because you're not planning to be a professional racer or you're planning to go to race professionally kind of thing when you start spewing 10 grand out. But I guess it's all in the mix of passion for it if you really want to do it. It's all tier level on how you want to do things. Either you want to get really good at it. I mean, I've been pretty lucky, I think, for years now riding in the street to the even point where, you know, I've pushed the limits quite a bit. And I actually have a very good understanding of you know, riding on track, even though I don't ride track, really braking before entering the corner to hit the apex. Just so you brake before, you don't want to brake before because it's going to stand your bike straight up. And then just coasting right to it to look through the apex and then throttle out just right enough to carry yourself out. I mean, granted, I think I got lucky learning all this stuff riding in the street because it never really ends well. I don't think I do any of that stuff anymore in the street, but I have a very good understanding of it and looking through the corner or even blind or even uphill or downhill. Those are also very tricky as well. Learning that stuff in the street is pretty scary, which I think I've done it when I was a lot younger. Granted, now if I'm riding, you probably wouldn't catch me doing any of that stuff in the street because I mean, when I think about it now, and I'm like cringe a little bit, just like we were saying, it's like, damn, if that went wrong, really, granted, now that I understand it, that would have been really a bad day for me. You know what I mean? So, with obstacles, cars, and trees or bench, whatever it is, poles in the street, it's just a lot. And I find myself riding very different. I always mention this to people. I ride very different now. Not that I ride scared, but I feel like I'm very well aware of the risk. I think when you mentioned, like when you're 20s with the R6, when we met up years ago, we were doing all kind of foolishness going down the road. And would I do these things now? 100% no. It's just, I guess, knowing the repercussion. You know what I mean? So, but I think it's definitely an awesome tool. I've seen those Ovalies before. I didn't recognize the name, but I've seen Josh Herron do some really crazy stuff with it. I've even seen him high side one at some point, and I never thought it was that. I thought it might have been like a Grom or something like that. And I thought they were between like 4,000 to 6,000, not 10. But that's pretty wild.
Like I said, the used older ones they could probably get for the range that you're talking about, between 4 to 6, I think. Again, it's a big investment, but Mike, it's a question of you're gonna bite the bullet one way or the other. So if you have an Ovale, all right, I'll put you into perspective, because I've owned all of these bikes. I've tried everything. So I can tell you from a standpoint of somebody that's ridden a big bike, has ridden a small bike, has ridden the supermoto, has ridden on the street. You're going to get bit one way or the other. I'll give you an example. I had an Ovale. I was paying $60 to $70 for a track day at a go-kart day, okay?
That's not bad.
To the point, all right, well, you go to the go-kart track. Okay, so I've put the initial payment for the Ovale, okay? I think I'll even be open with the viewers. I spent $5,500 on this Ovale that was relatively used. It needed a little bit of work. Basically, 55 was everything between, a little bit of body work, repainted, it's because it's a small bike. It wasn't really that expensive to paint it, etc. Tire warmers, little things here and there. So $5,500, $70 to ride. You ride to the point where you are so tired that people leave before 3 p.m. Okay? You are riding out there for 30-minute sessions sometimes, and by 3 p.m., no one is there. So you're riding until 6 by yourself, literally open track. And anybody that rides track knows that open track is heaven on earth. Everybody wants an open track. Everybody wants to show up to a track day, and they're the only person there, and there's no traffic, and they have a beautiful open track to ride on. We'll go to something else. For example, an R6. Okay, R6, like we said, $6,000 or so, right, for an R6, $7,000. By the time you end up putting fairings and everything else, you're going to be out the gate maybe $10,000, right? Between body work and clip-ons and this and that, and of course you want an exhaust, right? You want a tune for that exhaust, all these things. Gate of entry for a track day on the big bike, $99 for your first track day. After that, you're going to be paying an average of $280 to $300 something per track day.
Wow. I always thought so I noticed a lot of people group, like they do a grip so they could kind of break down the cost, but I never thought it was almost $300 per day.
This is if you don't have a membership. Now, if you buy a membership, that's $300 to $400, which, by the way, has increased significantly over the years. Then you can go ahead and purchase the track day for between $200 to $280, depending on what facility is, etc. So, for example, Coda is a $500 per day track day, from what I understand, because I've looked up the cost, and we thought we were going to go down to Coda, and we were going to pay until we saw and realized $500 for a day at Coda. Is it really worth it to drive 16 to 18 hours all the way down to Texas and then spend $500 per day to ride Coda? Whereas, for example, maybe if you go with a group, it'll be a little bit cheaper. So this is where things starting to come into play, like knowing a group that helps. So you guys go in together as a group of 20 or 30. So the organization knows that you guys are a confirmed group. They'll give you a special rate, for example. Or what a lot of folks do, for example, at the track up at NYST, is they'll start an organization. They'll put their own money down to rent out the facility, and then they'll invite all of their friends and anybody else who'd like to come. Here's the rate that we would like to charge for the day. The more people show up, the less, obviously, per head that you
like
need to pay.
Subcontracting almost.
Almost like a subcontracting. Mm-hmm. And then you got your third option, which is you buy your street bike for $6,000 to $7,000. You go out there, you're not able to push the bike the way that it's designed to be pushed. You're going to be obviously, I think motorcycling on the street is a different experience. I think for somebody our age now who's a little bit later on in their years and have kind of gotten the craziness out of their blood, yeah, we can go out, we can go for a cruise in the Catskills, we can go up to Bear Mountain, get some fresh air. But for somebody who's young and hot-blooded and wants to push the bike, like a lot of times I see out here, you're going to end up paying tickets, wrecking the bike in a way that you're not going to be able to come back from.
Yeah.
Hurting yourself, hurting others. A lot of times destroying the machine in a way that is incomprehensible. So a lot of these factors start to come in, ruining your license, right? I mean, you don't think about it until the day that you are in court and the judge is looking at you going, you're going over 100 miles an hour in a 65 zone, and he just strip you of your license, and you're wondering, how am I going to get to work? And work is 45 minutes one way. So you either got to Uber or some other way. So these things start to add up, and you know, in different ways. Like I said, you got to pick your poison. And unfortunately, you have to pay to play. So yes, I found that track riding is a little bit more expensive, but I get to ride the machine that I would like to ride, the way that I would like to ride it specifically. And I think the way that it's designed to be ridden. And in a manner that's safe where I don't have to think about, okay, am I going to be able to work on Monday? Because unfortunately, at the end of Sunday, I've got to pack all my stuff up by myself.
Yeah.
I'm not Mark Marquez. I don't have a team, right, that's out there packing up all your stuff after you've done a day of riding or a weekend of riding. And I've got to clock in on Monday. So I need the use of my hands and my fingers, and I need to be able to talk, right? So these are things that a lot of people don't think about, I think, that comes into perspective once you've tasted all of these different ways of riding. I think maybe for somebody like you, supermoto is the way to go. So I've tasted obviously all these different kinds of riding, and now I've been heavily focused the past season, 2 seasons on riding supermotos, which I think is a good mix of big bike speed and fun and action and big power, but at the same time, I'm still at go-kart track, so I'm still paying a fraction of what a big track day rider would be spending. And I'm seeing it obviously in the fact that the supermoto races are filling up. People are buying these bikes. So for example, the FS 450 from Husqvarna, KTM's 450 SMR. People are building still CRF 450Rs, although not as much. Obviously, it's a little bit more. You need to be a little bit more hands-on and mechanically inclined to be able to build a bike like that. So from time to time, you'll see a TM out there if somebody's got some big bucks. So people are doing it. You know, it's accessible. I think it's just the way that you decide to go about it. And I think the mini stuff and the supermoto stuff is probably a good way for people to get entry, because you're not spending as much money as a big bike. You can still have your normal street bike, and then you can go buy a dirt bike and buy the kit to convert it over to a supermoto. You got yourself something fun that you can use in the dirt in the winter. You can use it on the supermoto track during the summer. You know, you've got something that you can use in multiple facets.
So here's my thing to you. So, man, this could go so many ways. There's just a lot I'm gonna throw at you here, and I think I'm trying to sponge most of this because this is a good stream for me, only because I'm not just like having a conversation with you for just the live chat or to go live. This is awesome because I'm taking a lot from it and really kind of setting perspective on what do I really want to do, because I think it's very tricky. You say I want to do track, you're thinking you get a race suit, as I mentioned before, race suit, tape it up, you can go. But nobody really talks about the real in-depth, like what we're doing right now, because this is a real reality check if you really want to do this. And most people will not tell you that they're going to kind of force feed you. I feel like if you go to a dealer, it's like, yeah, dude, come do track with us, man. Just kind of get you in, because they know once you get to it, you like it. It's very enjoyable.
You're hooked.
You're hooked to it. So now it's figuring out like, oh my God, this is $400 and I got to do this, but I really want to do it. So now you're already doing it. I think they use it in that perspective. Before I ask you the main question I was going to ask you, the thing I wanted to know, so if you do track day on a regular basis, right? And it's pretty much the same track. You become really fast. You know, a lot of it become muscle memory. You know where to brake. You know how to accelerate. You know how fast you can get to on the straightaway before hitting the brakes to So you're basically fast. You could time attack that entire track, no problem, which is really good. My question here is, how does that translate to riding? Because I'm wording the question a little bit all over the place, but it's just my thought about it. How does that translate to riding on roads you've never ridden before confidently? Because one thing that happens with me, I travel a lot and I ride bikes, all different bikes, and I ride roads I've never ridden. And the things that always happen to me when I get out there, I get on the road, I never ride like how I ride in New York. You know, I come off more of a noob, more of a beginner rider. First off, it's a bike I have never ridden. It's new to me. Just out of respect for the bike or the person's bike that I'm riding, I don't risk it. Second, I don't know the road. I don't know the exits. I don't know where anything's at. So the real question here is how those skills from the track translate for you to be able to interpret any track, or I wouldn't say track, any other obstacles easily. Because, for example, like a GP rider or a Moto America or WSBK, these guys run training laps before. They do training for the day before. You know, it's memorized. So the real question here is, how does that translate? You know, going into a blind corner or going downhill into a blind corner, and it's not a track that you've ridden, it's a street road that you're attacking, kind of thing. So that's my thing.
I think it's important to bring up a couple things here. I'd like to give out a shout out to PJ Jacobson, who I've done a lot of training with. He is a Moto America racer who races in the Stock 1000 class, as well as he's raced in Europe. Quite an accomplished American racer, and he's taught me a lot of things. I've done a couple of days with him privately, one-on-one, which I would suggest for anyone that is able to or is in the Florida area to check him out. PJ Jacobson Training, really cool guy. I think he gave me a very interesting insight on what some racers have to struggle with. I showed up one time to a track that I wasn't familiar with, and that was where we were going to train. That was the first time that we were going to meet up and train. And I asked him, I said, a lot of times I show up to a new track and I'm not familiar with the track. I don't watch sometimes the footage beforehand. I don't look at the track layout. And I feel as though it takes me a lot of time to catch up pace. And I go, sometimes when I'm watching World Superbike or I'm watching, some of these other, top echelon sports, like, for example, MotoGP or, Formula One even, I think. I go, a lot of these guys, sometimes they're new racers. They show up to these new tracks. How do you guys learn these new tracks? Or if, for example, you go to a new place that you've never coached at or you've never raced at, how do you, how does that go about? Like, do you spend the whole day, the first day, just learning? And what he told me is, as a professional racer, he needs to understand and be within, I think, 10% of the top 10 by, I think, the 10th or 15th lap. So he's basically got 10 laps to get up to pace. So I think if a professional can get up to pace that quickly, I think it signifies that they've done a lot of training and a lot of correct actions in order to be able to get to that pace, right? It's not like they just go out there and they learn, right? So they watch the footage, they watch other racers, they go back and ask, right? They look at lines. They do a lot of studying that I think is not applicable in every situation as a street rider, for example. But what track riding can definitely bring to street riding, for example, is, at least for me, the biggest thing was situational awareness. And I preach this, I think, a lot to a lot of people that ride with me, even on the street. Situational awareness is a big thing that you need to implement extensively when you are operating any machine of any sort at this kind of level, right? You need to be aware of what is happening around you, and that is what dictates what you do on the machine, right? So, for example, if we're on track, you're unsure of a specific corner, you don't go in full tilt into the corner and expect, oh, I'll make it out of there. You're going to start at a specific point, and each lap, you're going to maybe, for example, brake later, a little bit later, until you get to the point where you get up to the number, The numbers that are usually lined up at the end of a corner, basically the brake markers.
Yes.
You'll work your way through the brake markers, right? You'll work your way through picking up the throttle after you get past the apex. These aren't things that you just go in full tilt. So that, like I said, is the first part, is the situational awareness. The second part I think to get into that's really important is being comfortable on the bike and being able to take whatever action you need. When you know, okay, once the bike is at this lean angle and I'm staring at the ground like this, I know that there is nothing left of me to ask of this bike as far as turning goes. We are at the edge of the tire and there's no further turning from here, right? That's one aspect that you could learn from track riding. Another aspect is, how hard can I brake before my rear tire starts to pick up or before ABS starts to kick in for folks that have ABS in their bikes? And that's something that I would suggest taking off if you are considering about getting serious in the track riding. Because obviously a human can do a much better job than the current ABS systems that we have today. And again, I think even that's with the super bikes that are currently on. A lot of the folks end up stripping, for example, ABS off the bike because we can do a lot better job as a human understanding and regulating the brakes of the motorcycle. Another thing, for example, that we could bring up is the amount of traction. So if you are out on a cold day, you know that you shouldn't be pushing the bike as hard as if it's a blistering hot day and the tires are extra sticky, your pressures are set correctly, etc. So these are all different lessons I think that can be learned from track riding, because all of the technology eventually that ends up in the road bikes that we purchase as a consumer trickles down from racing, right? Like, for example, Ducati. We can take any of the technologies that they have taken through racing throughout the years. For example, the trellis frame, right? The trellis frame was something that was created for a race bike, but then eventually was trickled down into the street bikes. And that's what, for example, Ducati is known, besides the big L-twin, which now eventually has switched into a V4, right? So these are all technologies that end up falling in. So I think the same thing happens with learning on track and learning techniques on the track. I think the biggest misconception that a lot of folks have is they think that when you are riding a bike fast, you're super aggressive on your inputs and you're manhandling the bike. When in reality, a lot of these guys that are super, super fast on these bikes are comparable to like very smooth and elegant ballet dancers. Every movement on the bike, Mike, has a purpose. Whether it be moving up off of the seat to get into the next corner and then staying on, for example, the right side of the seat because they know that they've got two more right corners. So they don't need to move off of the seat and get back in the middle of the seat. Or, for example, preloading the brakes, just slightly, a little bit of pressure on that front lever to get the pads warmed up and ready so that as soon as they start to ask of the brakes what they need to, the brakes are ready and responsive. So these are all the little movements that you don't really see until you start to study the sport, like we said, and you start to get into the nitty-gritty details of it. It's like any other, I guess, sport or hobby or activity, right? Mm-hmm. Take, for example, playing a musical instrument. You start off, and I'm not musically inclined, but I know that you start off with the basic, for example, on a guitar, basic notes, and you start to, put together all of those to start to form, right, the melody that you're playing. And then you start to get more complex with the way that you play and the notes that you're able to hit, and you have to train those muscles. It's the same way with motorcycle riding and track riding. I think today I'm a much safer and much more conscious rider, knowing what is happening on the bike and what I am doing, versus when we first met up and we were just ripping through New York City back and forth in between traffic and in between cars. And that's where I'll end the spiel. Like,
I watch our video and I'm like, oh my God. I know it's
Hey, remember how bent my plate was and how ridiculous we were? Yeah, shooting flames out of the bike. Yeah. The squid.
What's up? Oh. Man, that's just crazy, man. Anna's like, you gotta play the clip. I gotta cue it, babe. But since we're talking, I haven't done anything yet, but I definitely will. So, from what you just explained, with running the track a certain amount of time for you to adapt and kind of understand it, or at least studying it. So, technically, what I'm doing is not wrong. Like, if I go somewhere I've never ridden before, just ride it careful, not normal speed. Because
Ride your pace.
Yeah, just ride normally and don't try to be fast because you don't know. Because you don't know the braking zone. You don't know how you exit out. You don't know if it's a full turn that you got to look through. Maybe it was just a soft turn or something like this. It's very difficult, and I think it's something I think that I struggle with. Because in my head, it's like, dang, maybe these guys probably think that, oh, he's just a YouTube rider kind of thing, right? You know what I mean? Because you go out to Texas, these guys are pushing like triple digits, and I'm like, fuck, this is my first time out in Texas, dude. I'm not going to do that. And it's not my bike. I'm like, I wonder if they think he's just a YouTube rider kind of thing. You know what I mean? So.
Look, the same thing happens with me on track, right? I've been riding on track long enough that it got to the point where a couple of guys, some of the guys that were younger, hey, can you come out with us? Can we spin a couple laps? And I'm, like I said, I am by no means fast. I've just been riding longer than
you're being modest, man. Get
all
out
it
of
is.
here, dude. Get out of here.
We
man.
go out there and I'm cruising, you know, I'm supposed to be showing them the line, etc. And then, you know, one guy will blow by you on 1,000, another guy will blow by you, and then all of a sudden you've got to play cat and mouse with two guys that thought that they weren't fast but are pretty capable riders. You know, it's the same thing. Like I said, you know, it's situational awareness. I know that may sound like a preachy thing to be talking about, but it really is. You're never going to feel 100% to every single day that you get on the bike. I mean, it's just like anything else that you do. Some days you're going to be excellent. And granted, some people are really good and on point about being great on the bike always. But again, you're going to have your down days. And like you said, if you go into a road that you've never been on, look, we're playing a game of risk at the end of the day with our bodies, you know, especially at the speeds that you're talking about, triple digit speeds. You know, it used to bother me a lot until the point where I got into enough situations where I was either panic braking on the brakes or I was doing an endo, staring at the ground going, oh God, maybe I should have rethought this situation, or maybe I should have been going a little bit slower. So I don't fault you for definitely feeling like, hey, maybe they're thinking I'm a YouTube guy, but at the same time, you know, it's better to come back in one piece than to come back in pieces and be, you know, a front page story on YouTube about, you know, hey, I destroyed this bike out on my trip to Texas. You know, it's like I said, better to come back in one piece.
So by the way, by the time we're up to like the tail end of the week riding with everyone, I remember Jacob, he's one of the managers there. He was like, man, you were really booking it. Like, we've ridden the roads already. I'm like, he was like, you're having a good time on this one. I'm like, well, we've ridden the highways quite a bit. I'm getting a little bit more of they're like, nah, they don't chase you over here. And so I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, pushing a lot harder than, because I already kind of got to it. But I use myself as an example here. So about a week to 2 weeks ago, I think, Solo Rider went to an event. And it was, how do you call it, Fastlane D's meetup and stuff of his V4S P2. Yeah. And he was explaining to me, we spoke outside of the event. He was like, man, I'm slow, man. I got to start jumping on the track. And I was explaining to him, dude, you're not slow. You're just a little bit wiser now. You know, you're being smart about it. I'm like, you think you're running slow. And I'm like, these guys have ridden some of these roads out in whether it's Atlanta or something like that. They're used to it. And you're rocking your regular speed, but they're going way over that speed. You feel like you're slow. It's just you're more conscious of the consequences. And you've never been on the road before, which I think tends to happen quite a bit. And I'm like, dang, I really hope people don't think that I'm just a YouTube guy, because this is like this little thing. And I'm like, let's say if we were out Bear Mountain, it would be different. Or Hawk's Nest. I know those roads, you know.
So but again, I mean, these are roads, Mike. So I never take it too seriously when anybody passes me on a road, because I know at the end of the day, like for example, Bear Mountain. How many stories have we heard of people running off the side of the mountain, going up to that lookout up top?
Yeah, man.
Look, man, I've been there where I had to be the fastest rider on the street, pushing everyone around me. You can only survive so long doing that. And a lot of the guys that I ride with that are, I mean, fast. These guys, man, on the street, you would think they are like they can barely handle a bike. I mean, they're having a good time. That's all that they care about when they're on the street. And most of the time, you couldn't even catch most of these guys on the street. They'll tell you, I don't want to get hit by a car, man. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to take the risk, because once they've fallen on a bike at speed and they start to add it all up and they go, oh, well, I had 100 feet of, of space that I could basically slide in, plus a gravel trap, plus an air fence at the end of the gravel trap. Wow, I hit the gravel trap and I was fine, but I wonder if I hit a mailbox or if I flew off the side. Like you watch all these canyon dudes that are riding out in California. I mean, you remember when we used to watch our Mickey Mouse on YouTube and watch all these dudes on the Snake and Mulholland and everything? I mean, look, dude, I grew up watching that stuff. I was in high school glued to the screen watching that stuff. That's what I idolized. So you realize that it's, all these guys end up dying. You see it. I mean, on the phone every summer. Think of how every time that the season starts in New York City, think of how many people end up dying, or they do these newspaper runs where they're like 3 dead, or ran off a ramp, or this. And I'm not trying to be morbid or say that street riding doesn't have a place in the sport. I think it does. But I think that there needs to be an aspect of it that people understand. And even look at the manufacturers, man. A lot of these manufacturers are going to be cutting these high horsepower bikes out of the market. I mean, for example, look at the R6. I'm a guy that rides on track. The R6 is holy. All right. That's that is the bike of all bikes to pick if you're going to want a track weapon. They stopped making the R6 for the street. Now you've got to go out and buy a $20,000 track R6 from Yamaha if you want a track R6. Okay. So that bike is cut. Look at KTM. KTM, besides the Super Duke, doesn't make any big horsepower bikes. Think about
most people are using 390s though in KTM for track.
390s, 690s, right? Well, 690s I don't know for track, but 390s for track, or there was that one custom built bike that they built like a limited amount of. I think it was like the RC8 or something like that.
Yes, the RC.
That's what it's called. Yeah. So, these are the machines that are getting sold, man, because think about it. Not everybody wants to, A, spend that money, or B, I guess, go those speeds. There is definitely a healthy part of the sport that is growing, I think, and there's definitely a good group of people that still enjoy speed, but there is a vast majority of people that motorcycle riding for them is day-to-day travel. It's a commuter. It's an enjoyable way for them to get out into nature and to get out into the outdoors. And I understand that. So there's different parts of the sport. Like I said, it's, track riding is very niche. It gets very expensive very quickly. And in recent years, I would say in the past 5 years, it is starting to become more of a rich man sport. Okay. It used to be that the rich guys would go to cars, and the guys that didn't have so much money but were willing to risk their bodies would go to bikes.
Well, when you put it that way.
As crazy as that sounds, that's how it was put to me from the car guys.
Futuristic Viper mentioned here, Mike, whether you know the road or not, the road is always changing. One ride it's clear, the next ride a dead animal is there, all in the same day. So it's pretty dynamic. And again, I've really come to the idea and concept of not really caring too much. And again, most of the time that I'm out riding now, I find myself just enjoying the calmness and just chilling. Just really, I like a nice sunny day and just enjoying the bike as much as I can. I know people are like, oh, you have some really fast bikes, and it's like most people think that I'm doing like triple digits all the time. I'm just enjoying the bike, the atmosphere of the bike, and it's like, I'd open up every now and then, but nowhere near as much as before. And I always questioned myself. I was like, what has happened to me, or what has changed? To the point I was asking my wife, maybe I'm not into bike as much anymore. And she was like, what the hell are you talking about? So, I mean, I thought about it, A lot. I think for 2021, I was in that space where it was like, maybe I don't like motorcycles as much as I thought I did. And I think it was more the transition part. I think one time I rode Bear Mountain, I saw like a really bad crash. I think it really kind of screwed me up a little bit. So much so, like someone limbs came off and everything. It was just pretty gruesome. And I think it just, I don't know, man. It's like now I feel like I'm riding for food, like going to a place to eat and just kind of like cruise kind of thing. So it's just like chilling and stuff like that. So, but I think the bikes give a different vibe to people that see on the outside. It was like, oh my god, you got a spaceship. You know what I mean? To me, it's like I'm just chilling, man. You know what I'm saying? I said, yeah.
I mean, look, I think I'm kind of on the same wavelength that you're on because, and I don't fault you for it. I don't think it's a bad thing. Like, I'll give you an example. This season, I only did a big bike weekend in Florida, like in February and March, and that was like we drove down from New Jersey to Florida with the bikes, and it was a group of guys, and it's a good time. We went down there and we rode for a couple of days, especially in the middle of the winter. It's a nice, reprieve from this cold crappiness that's up here in the tri-state area. But after that, I haven't done any track days as far as big bikes go for this past year. And part of it is because, like you said, I feel like I stepped away a little bit from the sport because of cost, because of the hassle. I think the biggest thing is, like we were talking about, loading the bike, doing the checklist of all the stuff that I need to make sure that I'm, good to go when I get to the track. Getting there, doing the setup, getting everything ready, this and that. Riding the bike in itself is a job. I mean, the mental state that you are in and physically riding the bike, people think that it's easy. It's really not when you're riding the bike at that level. You think a 4-hour ride is something tough. Try pushing a 600 or 1,000 cc bike on track at its limit for like 5-6 laps. You will be sweating like nothing else. But anyways, to get to the point, I got tired of all of that it took to get to the track. So I chilled out a little bit. Like I said, I went to the mini bikes, which is less effort because the bikes are less heavy. It's easier to push these bikes into the back of the pickup, etc. And the other thing that I noticed was that I made a couple of purchases the past couple of years for street rides that I never in a million years thought I would end up buying. And those two bikes were a Honda Grom, which gets more attention from everybody than any other bike that I own. And probably the most fun bike that I own, because I do a lot of little errands, like 5-6 mile rides here and there, to little places, to the store, to work, etc. That bike by far has been the most fun, and it's nothing that's crazy. And trust me, I've pulled up to biker bars and people are, oh, what's that little mini bike that you got there? Ha ha ha. And then of course, I make the retort back that, the smaller the CC, the bigger the PP, which of course gets everybody. And then, the second purchase that I made that I never thought I would make was that Ducati Sport Classic.
Dude, that thing is nasty, man. Oh my! Yeah. By the way, guys, we went from single bikes. By the way, what's beautiful about this, and we were talking earlier, we went from single bikes and just chilling. Basically, single bikes to multiple bikes, and Ishmael was like, "I know what that means. It means you're doing well, man. I'm doing well."
Things are good. Things are good.
Things are good.
But I bought that Sport Classic, and I never thought that I would be into like that cafe racer, hipster vibe. And I'll be real with you. It's, it's a trip, but I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of embraced kind of like, dressing a little bit more mature, going out for a nice street ride. People as I roll by, the bike catches their attention, but it's, it's not like kids or crazy people screaming at me as I was on the R6. It's a different crowd, kind of like old women, for example, giving me the thumbs up, old dudes giving me the thumbs up, parents and kids kind of reacting to the bike in a positive manner. And I feel like I'm more approachable, whereas before maybe I was like, this kid that was riding this loud 600cc sport bike that nobody wanted to talk to, or the one guy will walk up, hey, cool bike, man, sounds nice. But then it became more of like a social aspect, and I found that bike started a lot of conversations. It was a conversation piece, kind of like when somebody buys a Porsche and goes to like a cars and coffee event and sits down, and it becomes more of a social aspect more than anything else. And I think you kind of know that with the Ducati too, right? It's when you're a Ducatisti, it's a little bit different. It's kind of like that Harley aspect, where you got the Harley guys that are all rolling together and they always say hi only to each other and stuff like that. It's kind of like an exclusive club, and you feel like you're part of a brotherhood. And I think that's kind of where street riding should be. It should just be like a chill kind of form of meditation, right? You get on the bike, like you were saying, you take these mini trips to go get food. I do the same thing on the Ducati. I go to different cafes and I explore different little towns and little hidden gems that I never thought I would, on these bikes. So I think it's important to kind of enjoy that aspect, because it's not all about going fast all the time, right? And I think to the other viewers' comment about the roads always changing, even on track, before you go out, they tell you your first lap is your sighting lap to make sure that there's no oil on the track, or for example, in some of the tracks in Florida, there are Mario Kart-esque, for example, tortoises and alligators that like to sunbathe on the track.
No way.
They come out from the middle of so for example, Jennings GP is known to have a couple of turtles and a couple of alligators that'll sunbathe on the middle of the track.
Jesus.
Yes. Don't hit any shells. That's all I'm gonna say. But it's a different vibe. It's a different aspect. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, that street riding, track riding, it's different forms of fun. You can have the chill vibe and you can have the fast vibe at the same time.
Bud Tussino mentioned here, how do you get a group to go to a track? Recommendation for anyone recommendation for someone who usually rides solo. So just trying to get an idea of how to kind of group up to kind of get it done and stuff like that. Because I think that seems to be the most cost-effective way to join riding. How do you call it? As a for track day and stuff
track
like
rider.
That.
Yeah, track day enthusiast. I would say the best way: show up to your local track days. Obviously, for some time, you're going to be maybe rolling solo, but eventually you'll end up, I hope, conversing with some people. I think that's one of the biggest things that I've noticed. The people that are most successful at the track are the people that are the most social. So don't be shy to approach that fast racer. They definitely have something to say to you as far as tips, tricks, anything like that. Approach coaches, approach groups of people that you see, and just have the conversation. Everybody is willing to open their arms. Trust me. I think I was most surprised when I showed up to the track and people, especially when we were novices, would tell us, like, ask somebody for tools. If you don't have a tool, just ask somebody and they'll be willing to lend it to you. Can't tell you how many times I've showed up to the track without something, walked up to another, little pit. Hey, how's it going? My name's Ishmael. Nice to meet you. Da-da-da-da-da. Can I borrow so-and-so tool? And then by the end of the day, we're cracking beers together and we're hanging out and we're chilling and, or we've run a session together. So I think it's important to be social at the track days, and that's how you'll end up finding these different little groups that run together and run these different specials, for example.
So I know you don't ride nearly as much in the street anymore, right? Mainly just track and stuff.
Like I said, the Grom has seen a lot of miles. We'll just put it that way. But other than that, yeah, it's mostly track.
Do you see that most people that ride street, once they do track, they'll quit out?
I think for the most part, yes. Most people do. If they can bear the financial consequences of riding on track, what a lot of people come back and say is that street riding starts to become boring to them. And I think the reason why that is because they approach street riding with the track riding mentality of every corner is a corner that they need to get through fast.
Yeah.
And I think like we've said, it's not necessarily the case. And I think a lot of people that say that they swear off the street, eventually as they get older, They end up on adventure bikes. They end up on enduros. I think the switch goes from being that hot-headed, hot-blooded young buck that wants to hop onto a sports bike to then you start to understand the different facets of riding. Just like yourself with your KLX 110, right? Did you ever think that you would end up owning a little
No.
KLX 110 and
No.
ripping wheelies?
Impossible. I was like, nah.
From the Mike that I knew with a 796 Monster, no way you would catch him on a dirt bike.
Back then, I wouldn't do it.
Right? So it opens up doors.
Yeah.
I think, even for myself, I've never done dirt riding. Now, all of a sudden, I'm looking at, hey, can I go buy a 2-stroke 125 and go rip out in the woods, this winter? So you start to develop. It's not just a one journey, hey, I'm going to get this one bike and that's it, right? I think it's kind of the same way with what they tell newbies. Don't worry about what your first bike is because it's not going to be your last bike.
Yeah.
You're probably going to end up having like 8 bikes throughout your lifetime, or if you're a maniac like me, 40 within 10 because you just keep buying and selling and buying and selling and buying and selling, right?
Jesus.
It's crazy. It's crazy, but you get into that point where you want to try everything and we'll go out there and start, buying and selling bikes. I think I know a lot of people that end up doing that year to year. They'll just end up with a new bike every season, right? They sell the old one at the end of the season. They put some miles on it. And then come winter, they come out with a freshie and, in the spring. And they do that year in, year out. They try a different bike, a different kind of riding, whether it be adventure riding or dirt bikes or track bikes or street bikes or cruisers. I think it's interesting that there's different facets of riding. That was one thing that I think I wasn't open to. And I think a lot of people aren't open to.
I think most of us that ride superbikes feel that way. Because it's like superbike is superbike. It's life. You know what I mean? So
yeah, like I got a leader bike. I got to go out here. I got to show everybody 200 horsepower. I've got to show everyone that I can manhandle this bike. Yeah, I get the mentality. But it doesn't last long. It never lasts long. And I can tell you, even from the guys that ride on track that have had big accidents because of big egos, they dial it back. Because once you have to check or cash that check that you wrote, it's a tough pill to swallow, Mike. I mean, you've known people in the community. I know people in the community with, metal in their legs, metal in their arms, maybe missing a leg, maybe missing an arm. It's tough. Yeah, not easy.
I agree. That these are all like super wise information that's giving out, to be honest, man. I mean, I feel, I always feel very, very fortunate that we've been riding all these years, and it's like I managed to skate. I think managing the early years to skate through, if you make it, I think you're more likely to be okay. I think the early years are really, really, really tricky, because one, your ego's very big. You get the fastest bike you can. And I think one of the biggest, not even the bike, not the ego, the fact that, I mean, it's not even a motorcycle thing. I think whenever you're young, it's like you're invincible. Because I would think like some of the dumb stuff that I've done, like not even on motorcycles, like over dinner, I would be talking to my wife. I'm like, dang, I've done some dumb shit. I really have done some really stupid stuff. And it's like, and I've made it. I didn't die. You know what I mean? It's like, and I'm thinking about it. Like,
I mean, we're the lucky few, Mike.
Yeah,
like,
that's wild.
Knock on wood, man. Like, I haven't had anything terrible. I've had friends that have been med evac and have had to have surgery, broken limbs. I mean, nothing death related yet.
Yeah.
But being choppered out of a track is a big deal, Mike. And I've been to track days where people have died too. So that's to put it into perspective. I mean, it's still at the end of the day a dangerous sport. And to get out without any major injuries or any major surgery is a big deal. And I think that goes back to the situational awareness point of view that I was talking about beforehand. I think that shows how much situational awareness you had because you understood your limits. I think also the first bike that you purchased, that 796, was a good bike to buy because it had a lot of torque, but not necessarily a crap ton of horsepower. So it was a fun bike versus your V4 Street Fighter that'll probably try to kill you if you had bought that as your first bike. I think that would have been much different. I think in the US we have a problem with, especially when we view motorcycles, because they're a luxury item. It's not something that we use for transport, where in other parts of the world, we tend to go for, all right, what is the biggest, best bike that I could buy for the money, which is usually the way that we think about everything that we buy, right?
Yes.
Whether it's a car, a refrigerator, a computer, a cell phone. And it doesn't allow us in the American market, I think, to really value the step-by-step process that everywhere else in the world they kind of have to go to. So I'll use England as an example here, where they have to go through their different licensing phases in order to be able to acquire that 1,000cc bike. There's no one at 18 in England who's riding a 1,000cc bike unless it's on track and BSB. So to put it into perspective, I think that's part of it maybe that's missing in motorcycling. I think in the US is kind of taking those steps. Yes, it's great to have the freedom to be able to go and buy whatever the heck you want, which is kind of, I think, ruined the sport in a sense, because now all of these bikes have tons of electronic aids in order to make them sellable, to the masses, right? That's what's made these bikes rideable for the average Joe to be able to putt around on an S1000RR or on a V4, whatever super bike they decide to buy. I think that's kind of the interesting standpoint from someone who's a track rider and watching kind of the technology kind of evolve as we've come through. And it's funny to see, even though all of these aids have come into play, Mike, you still show up to a track day and there are guys that are bundling up these 1,000cc bikes because they just, like we said, they buy a bike, they're 30 or 40, they think they're mature enough to handle a 1,000cc bike. They end up at the track, then they realize that they're over their head, they bundle the bike up, insurance ends up paying out for the bike, and then they go and buy a 300 or a 600 and start from scratch. It's like the funniest situation to watch, as far as the consumer goes. Whereas if we had a system where people were going through the steps, I think it would make buying that dream bike or getting to that super bike, I think, taste that much better for everyone. And I don't know. You maybe have an opinion that's different on that.
No, I mean, I think so. The thing is, I think it's really an American thing. It's like whenever there's limitation on anything, and someone else is telling you what you can and can't do, I think that's what becomes kind of a difficult thing. If you had asked me this exact question maybe like years ago, I'd be like, no, you could just buy whatever you want. Current time, current day, I think riding is, because here's what happened. When I bought all my other bikes I have in the garage, I ran them often. I enjoy them very much. I bought the KLX. I think the tail end of the summer till now, I didn't ride any of the other bikes. I've just been riding that like locally through the neighborhood and on a lot, just putting around and stuff. I've just been kind of chilling with that bike. I rode it at least a month and a half. The other bikes were just sitting. Yeah. So it's a very interesting thing, and I've been having so much fun with it. It's a big learning experience. It's very unique, very different. And I think the fear of like hurting myself or the fear of dumping a very expensive bike, none of that stuff is there. It's a completely different experience. I think anybody should experience that. Buying your dream bike is definitely amazing. It's cool. It's great to have. But there's a level of like, oh man, this is like 35 grand. If I go to get a drink in the car back into it, that's like a really bad day. Or if there's a little bit of grain on the floor and I take this corner too sharp and it falls, it's just, you know what I mean? That I think that stuff is always in the back of your mind. But I think when you have something that's small, that it actually help alleviates you enjoying all the other bigger bikes. So I think you get like really familiar. I feel what's changed in the past month and a half to almost 2 months is my rear brake game has extremely got really strong, like balancing the bike and just really just, it's some of these small things, but I feel like when I get on the Street Fighter, I get on the Hyper, I get on the Monster, the way I maneuver with the bike is so different.
That's why I brought up the Minimoto stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch, for example, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna bring up another YouTuber. There's an Italian YouTuber who used to do moto content by the name of Alberto Nasca. I don't know if you're familiar with him by any
No.
chance. And he's an Italian YouTuber that took folks through the journey of going from a basic beginner all the way up to trying to basically crack into what is the equivalent of like club racing or Moto America racing in Italy. And you notice that all of the extremely fast guys spent all of their younger years and still till now, when they are not on the bike, because they're contracted when they race to not touch any other motorcycles. Besides, for example, you'll see some of the MotoGP guys will ride motocross, but they're not allowed to touch any street bikes. So they will ride, for example, R3s that are stripped down and used. You'll see some of his footage, and I suggest anybody to go take a look. They used a stripped down R3 at a go-kart track to learn. They use mini pit bikes that are basically like 150cc, 190cc, kind of similar to the Ovale, but more of like a dirt bike stance like your KLX, for example. And he explains that the reason for this kind of riding is to ingrain that muscle memory of the correct techniques that they're supposed to be using, which is the exact same point that you're pointing out about how everything that you're learning on the KLX is transferring over to the other bikes. Because at the end of the day, you're still riding a bicycle, right? You're still riding a bike with two wheels. For example, that's why a lot of the guys that train fitness-wise for motorcycles will do, for example, road cycling, or mountain biking, because it puts you in the same position. You're training the same muscles. It's still the same muscle memory, right? So it's important to get those smaller bikes in, and I really preach that because not only does it help you from a riding standpoint, but even from a maintenance and working on a mini bike, right? It's a lot less intimidating to start ripping apart a $3,000 KLX that you can probably put back together without much effort or much headache, because everything kind of goes in its right place, versus, for example, your V4 Street Fighter, which if you start pulling panels off of that, and all the wires that are underneath it, you're like sitting there. And for example, for me, I get overwhelmed sometimes with some of the newer bikes that you have to look at.
Dude, I pulled the Street Fighter apart. That was crazy when I did that.
It's a computer. It's a computer. It's not a motorcycle anymore, right? So I think it's good to kind of go back to these basic bikes and just relearn some of the basics and solidify, right? Feeling better. Like I can tell you, my Honda Grom, not only is it that I've, been able to rip around the neighborhood without any thought of like, okay, I'm going to get a speeding ticket, but also I'm not going to hurt myself, or all of the mods that I've put into it. I think I've put more money into that little Honda Grom than I put into anything else. I mean, full Öhlins, master cylinder, just all these little things that I learned how to put on, over time. So it's the learning experience of taking care of the bike, riding it the way that it should be. And the other thing about these bikes is that I'd like to point out is that when you're riding them, they're built in a way that as the rider, you can override the bike. You can do things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on a bigger bike. So you start to understand nuances of riding motorcycles that you wouldn't necessarily learn on a bike, like you said, that's $35,000 that you're afraid to even drop in the driveway, right?
Yes.
I mean, I've had friends with these mini bikes like a KLX. Dude, they'll hop off the bike and literally let the bike drop on the ground and just walk to the bathroom, for example. Like it's like an old, bicycle from middle school, right?
Yeah.
Remember when kids would just throw their bike on the ground and walk away. So it's, like I said, I think it's important to get that aspect of it. There's many different aspects of motorcycling, as I've understood through my journey, and I think it's important to get those different parts in as you grow, right? You develop. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think it's a really, really dope conversation. Hopefully you guys walked away with a lot of little gems, but I'd say if you're doing track day, be ready to start swiping your card quite a bit, because I think it does add up a lot. I wanted to ask you this also before we kind of wrap up is, are there any chance, so let's say if you are an avid track day person, you do have a dedicated bike, are there any opportunities where you could let's say you're not a YouTuber, you're not doing anything where it's like to be known for. Are there any opportunity to kind of partner up with like a, I guess probably not, right? To kind of get a sponsorship or something like that, something to kind of help out for you to kind of do this.
I think unless you're racing, it's very difficult.
Okay.
I know that there are a lot of grassroots racers who will reach out to companies and they'll get sponsorships.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually the best way to start out. I think from somebody who has a moto platform on social media, it's probably going to be a little bit easier for you because there will be those business relationships, for example, that'll be there that you can maybe capitalize on. And I think there's some room. But at the end of the day, I think what really dictates those deals is, like I said, if you're in the track family, you know the organization, you've been loyal to them for a long time, that's when they start to accept you kind of as family, and that's when you start to see, you know,
The benefits.
I don't know, the benefits. Yeah, you know, like once you start to become part of a community, it's like when you become a regular at a bar or you become, you know, regular at a restaurant, you kind of get that preferential treatment, right? Because you're always there and you're always giving your business. So it makes sense at the end of the day, like I said. So I think that would be the best ways to just get involved to start off with. And then there are ways to budget. So I don't want to discourage anybody from the sport. It is doable, even if it's just a once in a month splurge that you do. It's a lot better than the points and the tickets that you're going to end up and hurting yourself on the street.
So, I have to ask you this. What's your thought on roll racing? I know you're probably seeing it on YouTube. It's pretty big right now. Lots of that going on. I have to ask.
I'm sorry, what was it?
Roll racing.
Road racing. Oh,
No, not road racing. Roll racing.
Roll racing, like high-speed roll racing on the highway. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're going to roll at 60 and then we're going to hit
Yes.
it.
Yes. What's your thought?
All right. With all of the videos of people getting hurt, here is my thought process on it. And this is my personal take, so I don't want anybody else to think that I'm trying to, like, you know, set the rules or the boundaries of riding. As a rider, I don't ride with more than 3 people. That is my personal rule, and that is because of things that I've witnessed on group rides. I think roll races between 2 individuals or 3 individuals in a controlled manner is absolutely fine. I think people can definitely handle it. But once it starts to become a larger group, it starts to become a little bit too mismanaged. Unfortunately, when you get to speeds that are exceptionally high, even if you are going in a straight line, sometimes you cannot dictate what's happening with yourself, the motorcycle, or with someone that's next to you or behind you. So I think that it's important to possibly keep that kind of racing in a very confined manner, and if possible to take it to a drag strip, because unfortunately you just never know what can happen out on the street.
Because it is pretty popular on YouTube, I think, the roll racing scene, and it's definitely taken off a lot. I think the cool aspect about it for me is the custom bikes where people are building them just directly for roll racing. I think that part is really cool. Again, quite a few people do it, and this is not like hating on anybody or anything like that. I just wanted to kind of get your take for someone that rides track, because I think personally most people that does a lot of track days or dedicated to track, they have a specific point of view when it comes to that. Even let's say to someone that does street Rossi stuff, I'm sure they have a specific point of view of that as well.
Of course. Yeah. I mean, of course, the community, the track community is very vicious in that sense. I will say that. I mean, the road racing guys, the roll racing guys, they'll tell you off the rip. You know, basically, it doesn't take much skill to pull, you know, the throttle and click through gears. Right. That's the one thing that track day riders will always say. You know,
I'm gonna disagree on that one. I'm gonna disagree on that for sure.
Just like they'll say about the street Rossis, oh, you can't really get to your full potential. You're gonna end up hurting yourself. So there are, like I said, there are a lot of stereotypes that come with each kind of, like, just like the track day guys, right? Like a lot of people that ride on the street will call track day guys track day queens because all they do is ride on track, right? So it's, you know, there's a stereotype about each kind of rider. From my standpoint, from a safety standpoint, which I think is the biggest thing, because at the end of the day, I want to get home in one piece.
Yeah.
For me,
the one thing I'm going to tell you for sure, at least based off my experience, I think it definitely takes some skill for roll racing. I don't know if you've
I mean,
tried.
Mike, you're talking to the guy you remember.
Huh?
That used to rip through cars at 100 miles an hour. I used to lane split and roll race guys and cars all the time up and down the New Jersey Turnpike, Route 1. I mean, it takes some level of skill, but it's not the same skill, I think, as track riding.
No. Nowhere near. I just wanted to make sure. I don't want anybody to see like, oh, no, they definitely think there's. It definitely takes, and it definitely takes some skill. Also, a lot of.
You need to know.
Yes, you need to know for sure.
You need to have a lot of confidence, I would say, maybe reckless confidence, but besides that, obviously the knowing part that you need to know is how to set up the bike. There is a science behind it, right?
Yes.
Like strapping the front end down and extending the swing arm and running certain pressures. There is a whole science behind it, right? Just like when they drag race bikes or they drag race cars, there's a lot of science that goes behind it. But I think the amateur level that is being done on the street, like I said, I think from a safety standpoint, I get it that it's like grassroots racing in the sense that people are going out there and making the most of what they have and they're just trying to have a good time. But with the amount of, and you've seen it too, the wrecks that happen in some of those roll racing events, or when people go out for these meets and end up roll racing on the highway, it is catastrophic once one or two of them hit each other. Like you'll see the group in front will slow down and somebody will still be cooking and they'll hit somebody or just deflect off of somebody barely. And then it's lights out from there. It's just carnage. You know, it's like the car meets where people are doing burnouts, you know, and somebody gets hit in the crowd when people coming too close. It's just like World Rally Cup, for example. You know, you watch World Rally Cup from back in the 80s and 90s, man, all they had was like a wire, just a piece of rope. This car is plummeting, doing flips into the crowd and whatnot. Like I said, there's got to be a point where safety takes the forefront, not to say that we got to kill the fun, but I think it's a very risky behavior. That's how I'll put it as far as the roll racing.
All right, guys. So we are running up on that 2-hour mark, guys. If you have any question you want to throw up or anything you want to ride with us here, actually, let me pull up that video real quick so I can definitely play it. Something soft real quick just before we kind of wrap up, guys. We're coming on that 2-hour mark. This will be that time. Hold up here. I'm probably going to pull that up on YouTube because it didn't. I downloaded it into my server. Let me see if I can find it here.
Yeah.
Let's see. By the way, guys, thank you for everybody that's tuned in, that came through and watched and kind of chimed in between. It's always very cool to have everyone come through and be part of the stream, 100%.
What do these go for new?
Oh, yeah, it is in here. Great. That is so funny that this guy's like, what does these go new? So probably gonna cringe of how terrible my video was, my quality.
If I remember it correctly, the quality was great.
I hope so.
I remember rewatching that video quite a number of times, shamelessly.
It's kind of weird that it's not.
That's not nice.
Oh, that's Siri, guys. All right, I'm just gonna play it through my screen because usually I load it onto like a queue and I'm able to play it, but just gonna play it through my screen. But
Problem.
all right.
What do these go for new now? About 14?
Yeah.
These are fucking badass.
Yeah, they're beautiful, man. Thank you.
Oh, it's slowing down. Oh, okay.
All right, guys, so
I see what's going on. Hold on, wait. Oh man, this is
It's a trip. Down memory lane.
Yeah, man. This is holy hell. Good times though, man.
Definitely, definitely.
All right, this is gonna play properly.
What do these go for new now? About 14?
Yeah.
These are fucking badass.
Yeah, they're beautiful, man. Thank you.
I remember that guy. We,
All
we
right,
just
guys,
hopped
so
out,
I
I think,
have
the restaurant.
Ishmael with me here.
Oh,
That's him
come
right here on the
on.
right.
Seriously?
Here on the right.
Sounds good, man.
Thanks.
All right, I'm not. I'll try something else. All right, there we go. If I don't play that video, I know Anna's gonna be like, "You should have played the video." That's what she's gonna say to me. Why you didn't play this video? I really like it. All right,
It
cool.
was a good video.
Definitely gonna. There we go, guys. All right.
What do these go for new now? About 14?
Yeah.
These are fucking badass.
Yeah, they're beautiful, man. Thank you.
Old logo.
All right, guys, so I have Ishmael with me here. That's him right here on the right.
Sounds good, man.
Thanks. We're just kind of cruising through Manhattan. I just met the dude.
Love the helmet.
It's a fucking pleasure to meet you, sir.
Pleasure's all mine, man.
He is one of my viewers, and amazingly, he messaged me. I invited him to take part in a meetup and hang out with me.
Looking good, man.
You're looking good. Look at you. Look at you. It's been incredible, man. It's been like my pleasure to meet him and chat with him and get feedback and hear about his thoughts and opinion about the bike and channel. So it's just amazing the things that can happen when you're on YouTube, the people you're gonna meet. And we are using our new dual view here to actually check out Ishmael's bike. He's running an R6.
That bike looks clean,
really
man.
Nice bike, all in black.
Still clean looking.
Geared up, so a little squid in here.
What do you think about James Garden?
That was just
So here's the thing. I had this.
us talking and me venting about YouTube. By the way, always venting about YouTube, guys. But yeah, it's always a really good experience, man. YouTube or
Absolutely.
not, but it's always a pleasure being on YouTube. Let me take a quick look here, see if there's any comments here. Fiber and Girls and We brand. Let me just pull this up here, pop this up. It'll be easier to read it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Last call for any comments before we wrap up. Fiber and Girls and Where am I good to brand? Okay. I was talking about skates here. Okay. Maximum effort mentioned here. I think safety all comes to the person and the circumstances. Street Rossied for 11 years, and after I had my 2 kids, I slowed down and mostly tracked jet ski and dirt bike to fulfill my adrenaline. Maximum effort also mentioned it. Oh yeah, he's big. He's always riding in the harbor out here in New York, man. He rides me. He used to ride a lot of track before, and he was rocking like an R1, and now it's mainly like 250s, 450 dirt bikes, and mainly his entire summer, all of his posts were just all jet skiing in New York, like the harbor in New York.
Yeah.
But when you're in that life, there's nothing like it. 180 miles an hour with your boys and family, you feel like a fighter pilot. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is, man. I think there's a roll of a dice. I think there's only certain you have like a time frame and stuff. And also, you mentioned something that was very crucial while we were talking prior to even the stream, that as time go by, your reflex is a little bit different. You're probably not as fast. You're not reacting as quickly. So things change, and I think a lot of time it goes unnoticed to us. So, because, for example, when you're 20, you feel 20 forever. You're 25, you're 25 forever. As you start getting older, because your mind really doesn't get older, but the body's reaction time is different. So stuff like that's always very interesting to kind of see. And I think if you don't mentally catch up to it, where you start making adjustment or at least recognizing what's happening, it might get ugly and stuff like that. But it's all good, man. So, Ishmael, anything you want to wrap up before we kind of go here? I mean, it's been really awesome. I really appreciate all your input, all your honest feedback about track and the real cost. Like I said, so many people come on and talk about track and how amazing it is. They never really kind of give a real understanding in terms of costs. And granted, I know it's going to be fun. It's really going to help you harness your skill and help you enjoy your bike more on the road. And in some cases, I think it turns people off from road riding. I think if you really separate the two, meaning understanding when you're on track is really you can really kind of squeeze your bike to get the most out of it. Also learn as much as you can about how to attack the road. And then understanding when you're on the road, it's a different kind of riding. You're doing I know it's not an adventure bike, but it's more of an adventure. It's more like about the destiny of where you're going, destination of where you're going and the people you're with. So I think the pleasure of riding in the street is more like that. I think a lot of time we misconstrued oh yeah, I'm just going hard on this highway. And I think, when you go from track and you keep that same mentality, you're like, nah, well, I know I shouldn't. So you really got to break the two. So I'll let you wrap up so we can call it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like I said, I think it's important to differentiate between the different experiences in riding. I think we definitely made the differentiation between street riding versus riding on a motocross track versus riding on the street. And I think it's important that anybody and everyone can enjoy any of these different aspects. I encourage everyone that thought that they would never or that they would not ever want to step foot on a track to do so. I think that they would be very, very surprised to find the community that is there. And it's very similar, obviously, to the community that is on the street. And at the same time, I would also love to remind the folks that are on the track that it's important to bring in the newcomers and to, still keep the grassroots and go out on the street and still enjoy your bike in a relaxed setting. Again, like I said, I know that everybody has different wants and needs, so those things are going to change from person to person. But I think at the end of the day, we're all riding, we're all on two wheels, and I think we're all here to have fun. So that's the number one thing to remember. With that being said, I want to thank you again for having me on here, for showing me the respect and inviting me up. I know that it's been some time since we spoke, but it's always great to catch up with old friends. And if you ever want to come out to the track, Mike, and if you ever want to try, whether it be mini bikes or big bikes, just give me a call, give me a holler, and we'll definitely set something up. And I'm sure you'll bring your cameras and stuff, and we can definitely do experience to share with everyone that hasn't been on track so that they get an idea.
I think supermoto or mini bikes would be a good start, man. I think it's going to be cool. And what I think is really dope, man, it's been a while since we've spoken, and I think whenever you have good relationship with people, man, it's almost like the friend you met in high school or through college. You stop talking to them for a little bit, and when you do talk, it felt like it was yesterday. So this conversation was dope and really, really cool. Ishmael, always a pleasure, man, and really, really cool. Thank you so much for coming through and just filling us in, man.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I appreciate it. I hope everyone has a good night, and hopefully we can have this dialogue again, my friend.
Absolutely. Just going to read Solo Rider's last comment here. He mentioned, as you get older, you understand the consequences. There's no reset button in real life. And on that note, I'll catch you guys next Sunday. Thank you for coming through, guys. Remember, you want to support the stream, definitely hit those links if you want to shop for any parts for your bikes. I'll catch you guys next week. Peace. Thank you, Ishmael. That was really